Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to the channel where today I'm going to try to express some thoughts that I've been sort of trying to put to words and I've been struggling for a while. So I would love it if you could comment as I go along and share your thoughts and your opinions on this topic, which is none other than what I feel is the ephemeral nature of the short horror story. Let me elaborate on that. So the big picture is, I feel that the short horror story it lends itself to very quick consumption, but it doesn't have any staying power. Like you just forget about them really, really quickly. Now, um, just need to clarify here and go with definitions. So basically, horror. What is horror? Horror is a very intense emotion. And because of that, because it is a very intense emotion, I'm going to say again, sorry for anyone that follows the podcast or the channel, the natural habitat of horror is the short story. One more time, no one's going to convince me that this is horror. It's just not. This is something else. Now, obviously, there are you don't have to have a 900, almost 1,000. I think it's 1,000-page book. There are all the stories that have endured over time, and they're not necessarily short stories. Something like the portrait of Dorian Gray, or the picture of Dorian Gray. Sorry. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or Bram Stoker's Dracula. But I would argue here that these have gone into the popular subconscious. There's been so many adaptations that we are very familiar with them. But were you to read them without any influence from the adaptations, difficult as that may be, I suspect that feeling of horror would be very largely absent. Now, there are many short story horror writers out there, and it's incredible. Just going to Amazon and type horror anthology, and you get flooded with books and anthologies and so on. You could almost read only horror anthologies published every year, and like I said before, you just forget about them. They don't have any staying power. I've got a few collections, Ghosts and Grisly Things by Ramsey Campbell, and I can tell you, except for one that I vaguely remember, and I didn't find it that scary, can't remember anything about them. Algernon Blackwood's the John Silence stories, I could read them again and it would feel like the first time, honestly. What have we got here? A few more things. The Ghost Stories by Emma James. No idea what's going on there. The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. No idea. Ambrose Bierce, Terror by Night. I could just read them all over again. I've got zero recollection of them. Don't know. Edgar Allan Poe, the master of horror. I've got all his short stories. Pretty much. And I can't remember titles. I remember bits about The Fall of the House of Usher or The Pit and the Pendulum, but pretty much once again, I could read them again. Another short story anthology, Phantoms, by a lot of big names, very people in popular and big in the genre. Joe Hill, Paul Tremblay, M.R. Carey, and I've got this one. I actually met all the authors. It's all signed. I could read it once again, all over, and I can't remember anything. So I was just wondering why that is the case. There's no author, with one exception, that makes me want to go back and reread and hook me there. And one of the issues I've got, so one of the explanations I could possibly find or think about is that like the ghost story is so vanilla, right? Like how many times can you have a story with a ghost or some sort of entity there, and they're all pretty much sort of regurgitations or repetitions of the same thing. There is some sort of entity sort of chasing you or like appearing in your life, and I don't know, right? Like there's not that much going on. Again, the one thing which I believe sometimes gets sold as horror, but it's not, is the sort of psychological tension, or if your story is about building an atmosphere, again, that's not horror. You don't get that intensity of emotion. You're building and creating an atmosphere of 100, 200 pages. It's not intense, is it? It's just not. Maybe unsettling, but it doesn't quite work. So I don't know. I've been trying to understand why I keep going back to H.P. Lovecraft. Why that genuinely makes me feel unsettled. Why genuinely, after I finish certain stories, that moment of switching off the light before going to bed, you feel a little bit. And I've been trying to, like I said, figure out why. So I've been talking to people. Please, if you haven't done so, check out great conversations on the channel with H.P. Lovecraft biographer David Goodwin. Last week with the chaps from the Eldritch Episodes podcast. And I think I finally sort of understood. I've been asking this question to all these people. Lovecraft tapped on something that was unique and new. It wasn't the werewolf, it wasn't the monster, it wasn't the ghost. He really, I mean, there were monsters, obviously. All the mythos, comes from somewhere. But it was more about that cosmic nothingness, that realization that we are nothing in the infinite expanse of the universe. We worry about whatever our daily life may throw to us, and we think that some of our problems are important, but as soon as you start pulling out and getting a wider view, we are insignificant. We are these transient things. We are specks in this orbiting planet around the sun that itself orbits around an infinite expanding universe, and there's that. And he was incorporating again the changes that were happening in the world, the discovery of Pluto, the sort of recent journeys of discovery into the South Pole, and how all those things impacted us and made us realize certain things. So that's why I think Lovecraft is very unique, and his appeal in terms of his horror content is very much universal, and that's why he has had this enduring effect over time. It's almost 100 years since he started publishing, probably 100 years now, since he started publishing in Weird Tales, and we still read him, and it's still very relevant, and there's still adaptations, and they're still talking about him. Unlike maybe these other novels I mentioned before, Dracula, Frankenstein, obviously they've had their impact, but they've been perverted. Vampires are now sexy and erotic and cool, then they're not these bloodthirsty creatures that they used to be. And how many iterations of a monster can we get, or some sort of supernatural apparition? All those movies are the same. So I don't know. Like I said, maybe it's my nature. Maybe as a reader, for whatever the reason, I consume short horror stories uh, without really taking them in fully, appreciating them. I don't know. It doesn't happen with every author, though. I'm now also reading a book, short story collection by Joe Hill, and there are definitely a couple of stories that do have that stickiness, that lasting impact, in the same way that, as derogatory as I may be about Stephen King, there are some of his short stories that really do have an impact and that sticking power. In the same way that Pet Cemetery works really well and is indeed horrific, but that's because the structure of the book follows that of a short story. You get that unsettling twist at the end of the book. There's a very, 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 very slow crescendo of intensity, but the big reveal, the big twist, the big horrific feeling comes right at the very end, on the very last page, on the very last paragraph, which is what a good short horror story should do, in my opinion, which of course I could be very wrong. So please let me know your thoughts, your opinions on this subject. Am I completely off the mark? Do I just not understand? Or, you know, have I hit upon something remotely clever? Please let me know. But anyway, that's all I have for today. So as usual, please, please, please take lots and lots of care. And we'll see you soon. Bye.